But here's what Maya doesn't know. The man whose wallet she's about to return isn't just grateful. He's been searching for someone exactly like her for 3 years. Giving her his company isn't charity. It's the completion of a mission that started in the mountains of Afghanistan, where a promise made to a dying soldier is about to change 2 lives forever. This is the story of Maya Rodriguez, who thought returning a lost wallet was just doing the right thing. She had no idea it would reveal a legacy so powerful it could transform her from an invisible college student into the leader of a company worth millions, or prove that sometimes the smallest acts of integrity unlock the greatest destinies. Sometimes courage isn't about facing bullets or climbing mountains. Sometimes it's about doing what's right when no one is watching. Sometimes a shy person's quiet honesty is exactly what the world has been waiting for. The autumn rain drummed steadily against the windows of the university library, creating a rhythm that Maya Rodriguez found oddly comforting as she hunched over her economics textbook in the far corner of the 3rd floor. At 21, Maya had perfected the art of academic excellence while remaining practically invisible to her classmates. Her long black hair was always pulled back in a practical bun, and she favored oversized sweaters that seemed designed to help her blend into the background of lecture halls and study spaces. But invisibility, Maya had learned, wasn't the same thing as being unnoticed by everyone. Professor Williams often called on her when discussions stalled, knowing she'd have thoughtful insights even if she delivered them so quietly that half the class had to strain to hear. The librarians knew her by name because she was always there, always polite, always careful to return books in perfect condition. The custodial staff appreciated that she never left messes and often quietly picked up trash that others had dropped. Maya's world revolved around routine and responsibility. Every morning at 6:30, she took the bus from the small apartment she shared with her grandmother in East Portland to Portland State University. She attended classes with the focused attention of someone who knew that every grade mattered. Every assignment was a stepping stone toward a future that felt both essential and impossibly distant. Her scholarship covered tuition, but everything else, books, food, transportation, came from her part-time job at the campus bookstore and careful budgeting that would have impressed a financial advisor. Between classes, she studied in the library. During lunch, she ate simple sandwiches she packed at home while reviewing notes. After her bookstore shift ended at 8 p.m., she took the bus home to help her grandmother with dinner and household tasks before settling in for more studying. It was a life built on discipline and deferred gratification, anchored by the quiet determination of someone who understood that education was her pathway to something better. Have you ever felt like your entire life balanced on the edge of a knife, where one wrong step could send everything you've worked for tumbling into chaos? Maya lived with that feeling every day. Her grandmother's pension barely covered their rent and utilities. Maya's part-time wages stretched to cover food and transportation with almost nothing left over. She bought textbooks used, sometimes 2 or 3 editions old, and had learned to make a single notebook last an entire semester by writing in tiny, precise handwriting. But Maya's financial struggles weren't just about money. They were about dreams deferred and ambitions that felt simultaneously burning and impossible. She dreamed of starting a non-profit organization focused on financial literacy for immigrant families, having watched her grandmother struggle with banking, credit, and investment concepts that seemed designed to exclude people who hadn't grown up understanding the language of American finance. She dreamed of helping families avoid the predatory lending and financial traps that had cost her own family thousands of dollars over the years. Yet these dreams felt so far beyond her current reality that Maya rarely spoke them aloud, even to herself. How could someone who counted quarters for bus fare ever accumulate the capital and connections necessary to start a real organization? How could someone who had never had a business mentor or family connections in the professional world ever. Navigate the complex landscape of non-profit management, fundraising, and program development? On this particular Thursday evening in November, Maya was reviewing for her microeconomics midterm when she noticed something unusual happening at the table near the large windows overlooking the campus quad. A man in his 50s was gathering papers with obvious frustration, checking and rechecking his pockets and muttering under his breath. He had the kind of bearing that suggested military background, straight posture, economical movements, and an intensity of focus that made him seem alert to everything around him, even while dealing with his immediate problem. His hair was silver grey. He cut in a style that was professional, but not flashy, and he wore a simple button-down shirt and khakis that suggested someone who valued quality and durability over fashion. There was something about his methodical search pattern and the controlled way he was handling his frustration that made Maya think of her uncle Roberto, who had served 2 tours in Iraq and approached every problem with the same systematic thoroughness. Maya watched as the man finished organizing his papers, closed his laptop with decisive movements, and left the library with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to mission completion. She returned to her studying, but something nagged at her attention. About 10 minutes later, during one of her periodic glances around the study area, she noticed something dark on the floor near where the man had been sitting. Walking over to investigate, Maya found a brown leather wallet that had obviously been dropped and kicked partially under the table. It was worn but well maintained, the kind of wallet that suggested someone who took care of their possessions and expected them to last for years. Maya picked it up, feeling the substantial weight that indicated it contained more than just a few dollar bills and credit cards. Her first instinct was to turn it into the library's lost and found, but Maya had seen how overwhelmed the staff got with lost items, and she knew that sometimes things sat there for weeks before their owners thought to check. The man had seemed like he was dealing with something important, and Maya had noticed him glancing at his phone with the frequency of someone managing time-sensitive responsibilities. Opening the wallet to look for identification, Maya felt her eyes widen. There were several credit cards, a driver's license, and what appeared to be a significant amount of cash, more money than Maya typically saw in one place outside of a bank. The driver's license identified the owner as David Park, with an address in the affluent West Hills neighborhood of Portland. But what really caught Maya's attention was a business card tucked behind the license. David Park, CEO, Veteran Solutions, Inc. Maya stared at the business card, processing this information. She had heard of Veteran Solutions, Inc. It was a company that helped military veterans transition to civilian careers through job training, placement services, and small business loans. The company had been featured in several local news stories about innovative approaches to veteran support, and Maya remembered reading that it had helped hundreds of veterans find meaningful work in the Portland area. The weight of the wallet in her hands suddenly felt like more than just leather and contents. This wasn't just someone's lost property. It contained the tools that a business leader needed to function, the financial resources that probably represented both personal security and business capability. Maya thought about how panicked she would feel if she lost her own wallet, with its carefully managed debit card and bus pass, and tried to imagine the stress of losing something that contained business cards, corporate credit cards, and what looked like several $100s in cash. Have you ever held something that clearly represented someone else's entire professional life? Maya realized she was holding not just a wallet, but possibly the keys to meetings, transactions, and business operations that could affect dozens or hundreds of people. The responsible thing to do was obvious, but Maya felt a familiar flutter of anxiety about stepping outside her comfort zone. Maya's natural inclination was to avoid drawing attention to herself, to handle situations through established channels and institutional procedures. Turning the wallet in to lost and found would be safe, conventional, and unlikely to require her to interact directly with a successful business owner who lived in a world completely different from her own. But Maya also knew that the right thing to do wasn't always the most comfortable thing to do. She thought about her grandmother, who had taught her that integrity wasn't just about following rules, but about considering the real human impact of your choices. Her grandmother had immigrated to the United States with nothing but determination and a commitment to doing right by others, even when it cost her time, energy, or opportunities. Mija, her grandmother often said, "Cuando puedes ayudar a alguien lo haces, no importa si es fácil o difícil. When you can help someone, you do it. It doesn't matter if it's easy or difficult." Maya looked at the business card again, noting that it included both a phone number and a company address. David Park, CEO, someone who had built something significant, who employed people, who had created an organization dedicated to helping others transition to new chapters of their lives. Someone who was probably dealing with important responsibilities and would be genuinely grateful to get his wallet back quickly, rather than having to cancel credit cards, replace identification, and wonder whether his cash and important documents were secure. The decision crystallized in Maya's mind with sudden clarity. She would return the wallet directly to David Park, either by calling the number on his business card or by visiting the company address. It would require her to step outside her normal routine, to interact with someone from a professional world. She had only observed from a distance, but it was unquestionably the right thing to do. Maya carefully placed the wallet in her backpack, gathered her study materials, and headed for the library exit. The rain had intensified while she'd been inside, and she realized that her normal bus route home would take her relatively close to the downtown address listed on the Veteran Solutions Inc. business card. Instead of calling, she decided she would stop by the office. If David Park was still there, she could return the wallet immediately. If not, she could leave it with reception, along with a note explaining where and when she had found it. As Maya waited for the bus, she felt an unfamiliar mixture of nervousness and determination. She was about to enter a world of business offices and professional environments that felt foreign to her experience as a scholarship student working part-time retail. But she was also about to do something that aligned perfectly with the values her grandmother had instilled in her, and that felt more important than any discomfort she might experience. The bus ride downtown gave Maya time to think about what she would say when she returned the wallet. She practiced simple, direct explanations. "I found this in the library and wanted to make sure you got it back quickly. I thought you might need this sooner rather than later." She reminded herself that successful people were still just people, that courtesy and honesty were universally appreciated, and that she was performing a service that anyone would be grateful for. What Maya didn't know, as the bus carried her toward downtown Portland, was that David Park had indeed discovered his missing wallet and was, at that very moment, trying to decide whether to drive back to the university library or handle the crisis through phone calls to banks and credit card companies. She didn't know that the cash in the wallet represented funds he needed for a crucial business transaction the following morning, or that the loss of his identification could complicate travel plans for a veteran job fair he was scheduled to attend over the weekend. Most importantly, Maya had no way of knowing that David Park had been carrying something in that wallet that had nothing to do with money or business cards, a photograph and a letter that connected him to a promise he'd made 3 years earlier in Afghanistan, a promise that had been quietly shaping his search for the right person to continue his life's work. Maya was simply a conscientious student doing what felt right, unaware that her small act of integrity was about to intersect with a story much larger and more significant than she could possibly imagine. The bus pulled into downtown Portland. As evening settled over the city and Maya gathered her courage, along with her backpack. In a few minutes, she would walk into the offices of Veteran Solutions Inc. and meet the man whose lost wallet she carried. She expected a brief interaction, a moment of gratitude, and then a return to her normal routine of study and work. She had no idea she was about to step into a conversation that would change the entire trajectory of her life. The offices of Veteran Solutions Inc. occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower in downtown Portland, offering sweeping views of the Willamette River and the city's bridge-dotted skyline. Maya had never been inside a building like this. The marble lobby, with its soaring ceiling, the security desk staffed by uniformed guards, the bank of elevators that whisked visitors silently upward toward floors she had only seen from the street. Below, everything spoke of success, permanence, and the kind of professional world that felt as distant from her campus bookstore job as another planet. Standing in the elevator as it climbed toward the 15th floor, Maya felt acutely aware of her worn jeans, practical sneakers, and the backpack that had carried her through 3 years of college courses. She reminded herself that she was performing a service, returning lost property to its rightful owner, and that her appearance or background had nothing to do with the simple human decency of her mission. Still, when the elevator doors opened, to reveal a reception area decorated with photographs of smiling veterans in work uniforms and business attire, Maya felt like she was entering a world where she didn't quite belong. The receptionist, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and a professional manner, looked up as Maya approached the desk. "Good evening," she said warmly. "How can I help you?" Maya noticed that the woman wore a small pin on her blazer that read, "Army Veteran," and something about this detail made the office feel slightly more welcoming, a reminder that this organization was built by and for people who understood what it meant to adapt to new environments. "I'm looking for David Park," Maya said, her voice steadier than she had expected. "I found his wallet at the university library and wanted to return it to him." The receptionist's eyebrows rose with surprise and obvious relief. "Oh my goodness. Yes, he's been so worried about that. Let me call him right away." She picked up her phone and spoke quietly into it, then looked back at Maya with a smile. "He'll be right out. Please, have a seat." Maya settled into one of the comfortable chairs in the waiting area, using the few minutes to observe her surroundings more carefully. The walls were lined with success stories, framed newspaper articles about veterans who had started businesses with the company's help, photographs of job placement ceremonies, letters of thanks from families whose lives had been transformed by the services offered here. There was something deeply purposeful about the space, a sense that every element had been chosen to reinforce the organization's mission of helping people transition from military service to civilian success. But Maya also noticed subtler details that spoke to the character of the organization's leadership. The furniture was high quality, but not ostentatious, chosen for comfort and durability rather than to impress visitors. The photographs on the walls included not just success stories, but also images of staff members volunteering at community events, participating in veteran support activities, and engaging with local schools and non-profit organizations. This wasn't just a business. It was an organization with deep roots in community service and social responsibility. "Maya?" The voice was warm, authoritative, and tinged with genuine relief. Maya looked up to see David Park approaching from a hallway that led deeper into the office suite. He was taller than she had remembered from the library, probably around 6 feet, and his handshake was firm without being overwhelming. Up close, Maya could see the lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent outdoors and in challenging conditions, and there was something about his direct gaze that made her feel immediately that he was someone who valued honesty and straightforward communication. "I cannot tell you how grateful I am," David said, his relief evident in his voice. "When I realized I'd lost that wallet, I thought my entire week was going to be derailed. You have literally saved me hours of phone calls and probably days of hassle replacing everything." Maya reached into her backpack and carefully withdrew the wallet, handing it to David with a small smile. "I found it under the table where you'd been sitting. I thought you might need it back quickly, so I decided to bring it by rather than turning it in to lost and found." David opened the wallet and quickly verified that everything was still there: cards, cash, identification, and other contents that Maya hadn't examined closely. "Everything's here," he said, looking back at Maya with something that went beyond simple gratitude. "You know, most people would have just turned this in to the library and hoped for the best. The fact that you took the time to bring it here personally, especially in the evening when you probably had other things to do, that says something important about your character." Maya felt herself blushing slightly, unused to such direct praise from someone she had just met. "It just seemed like the right thing to do," she said simply. "I noticed you seemed like you were dealing with something important at the library, and I thought you might be worried about the wallet." David nodded thoughtfully, and Maya had the sense that he was processing something beyond the immediate situation of the returned wallet. "Can I ask you something?" David said. "What were you studying so intently at the library? I couldn't help but notice that you were completely focused on your work." Maya was surprised by the question, but something about David's genuine interest made her comfortable sharing. "Microeconomics," she said. "I'm majoring in business administration with a focus on non-profit management. I was reviewing for a midterm exam." David's expression shifted to one of increased interest. "Non-profit management," he repeated. "That's a challenging field, especially in today's economic environment. What draws you to that particular area?" Maya hesitated for a moment. Unused to discussing her academic interests with successful professionals, but David's attention seemed genuine rather than polite. "I want to start an organization focused on financial literacy for immigrant families," Maya said, the words coming out more easily than she had expected. "I've seen how much people struggle when they don't understand credit, banking, investment basics, all the financial systems that Americans are supposed to just know intuitively. My grandmother and I have dealt with some of those challenges ourselves, and I think there's a real need for education programs that are culturally sensitive and delivered in ways that don't make people feel ashamed about what they don't know." David listened intently, and Maya noticed that his focus had shifted from polite conversation to something more engaged and analytical. That's exactly the kind of systemic thinking that makes the difference between good intentions and real impact, he said. "Financial literacy is foundational to almost every other kind of social mobility. Have you developed any specific program ideas, or are you still in the research phase?" Maya was struck by how seriously David was taking her nascent plans, treating them as legitimate professional objectives rather than student dreams. "I've been researching existing programs and trying to identify gaps in services," she said. "I think there's a particular need for programs that help people understand not just basic banking, but also how to build credit responsibly, how to evaluate loan terms, and how to start building wealth even on very limited incomes. A lot of existing financial literacy programs seem designed for people who already have some economic stability." "That's a sophisticated analysis," David said, and Maya could hear approval in his voice. "The intersection of cultural competency and financial education is exactly where the most innovative work is happening right now. Have you thought about how you'd fund something like that? Non-profit sustainability is one of the biggest challenges in the sector." Maya appreciated that David was asking practical questions rather than just offering vague encouragement. "I've been studying different funding models," she said. "I think a combination of foundation grants, corporate partnerships, and fee-for-service Contracts with community organizations might work. The key would be keeping costs low while maintaining program quality, which probably means developing standardized curricula that can be adapted for different communities. David nodded thoughtfully, and Maya sensed that he was evaluating not just her ideas, but her approach to problem solving. "You're thinking like an entrepreneur," he said. "That's not something you can teach easily. Either someone understands how to balance idealism with pragmatism, or they don't. You clearly do." The conversation was interrupted by the receptionist, who approached with an apologetic expression. "Mr. Park, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have that conference call with the Seattle office in about 10 minutes. Should I let them know you'll be a few minutes late?" David checked his watch and looked back at Maya with what seemed like genuine regret about ending their conversation. "Maya, I don't want to keep you from your evening plans," he said, "but I'd really like to continue this conversation sometime. Would you be interested in having coffee later this week? I'd love to hear more about your non-profit ideas, and I might be able to share some insights about the practical side of building organizations that serve underserved communities." Maya felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. Coffee with a successful CEO felt far outside her normal experience, but David's interest in her ideas seemed genuine, and she realized she would love the opportunity to learn from someone who had actually built the kind of organization she dreamed of creating. "I'd like that very much," Maya said. "I usually have some free time between classes on Friday afternoons, if that works for you." David pulled out his phone and checked his calendar. "Friday at 3 would be perfect. Do you know Stumptown Coffee on Division? It's casual, good for conversation, and not too far from campus." Maya nodded. Familiar with the location, though she had never been inside, it was the kind of place that fit more naturally into the lives of people with disposable income for expensive coffee drinks. "That sounds great," she said. "Thank you again for being so interested in my ideas. I don't get many opportunities to discuss them with people who actually understand the non-profit world." "Thank you for returning my wallet," David said, extending his hand for another firm handshake. "But more than that, thank you for the reminder that there are still people in the world who go out of their way to do the right thing. That's exactly the kind of character that makes successful leaders, regardless of what field they're working in." As Maya rode the elevator back down to the lobby, she felt energized in a way she hadn't experienced in months. The conversation with David had made her non-profit dreams feel less like distant fantasies and more like achievable goals with concrete steps and practical considerations. But more than that, she had been treated as someone whose ideas mattered, whose perspectives were worth engaging seriously, and whose potential was worth investing time to explore. Walking through the marble lobby toward the street, Maya reflected on how different this interaction had been from her usual encounters with professional adults. David had listened to her ideas without condescension, asked intelligent questions that pushed her thinking forward, and treated her non-profit aspirations as legitimate professional objectives rather than naive student dreams. For the first time, Maya felt like someone from the business world had seen her as a potential colleague rather than just a young person with good intentions. The bus ride back to campus gave Maya time to process the unexpected turn her evening had taken. What had started as a simple act of returning lost property had evolved into a professional conversation that left her feeling more confident about her career direction than she had in months. David's questions had helped her articulate her ideas more clearly, and his obvious respect for her thinking had validated her sense that she was pursuing meaningful work. But Maya also found herself curious about David himself and the organization he had built. Veteran Solutions, Inc. clearly represented exactly the kind of mission-driven enterprise she hoped to create someday, successful enough to be sustainable, but focused on serving people who needed support rather than maximizing profits. David's approach to their conversation had demonstrated the kind of leadership style Maya admired. Engaged, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in helping others develop their potential. As the bus pulled onto campus, Maya realized she was looking forward to Friday's coffee meeting with an anticipation that went beyond mere professional networking. David had treated her as someone worth knowing, someone whose ideas and perspectives had value, and that kind of recognition felt transformative after years of feeling invisible in academic and professional settings. Maya had no way of knowing that David's interest in her went far beyond casual mentorship or professional encouragement. She didn't know that her thoughtful approach to returning his wallet had reminded him of values and character traits he had been searching for in potential business partners and organizational leaders. Most importantly, she had no idea that the photograph tucked behind his driver's license, the one she had glimpsed but not examined closely, connected her simple act of integrity to a promise that could change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. What Maya did know, as she walked across campus toward the library to collect her study materials, was that she felt more hopeful about her future than she had in months. Someone successful and accomplished had taken her seriously, had seen potential in her ideas, and had treated her as an equal in a conversation about work that mattered. For a shy college student accustomed to invisibility, that recognition felt like the beginning of something important, even if she couldn't yet see where it might lead. Friday afternoon found Maya arriving at Stumptown Coffee 15 minutes early, a habit ingrained by years of never wanting to keep anyone waiting, and her grandmother's firm belief that punctuality was a form of respect. The cafe occupied a converted warehouse space with exposed brick walls, industrial lighting, and the kind of deliberately casual atmosphere that Portland had perfected, upscale enough to attract professionals, but relaxed enough that someone, in jeans and a sweater, wouldn't feel out of place. Maya ordered a simple drip coffee, carefully counting out exact change from the small collection of bills and coins in her wallet. The $12 difference between her coffee and the elaborate espresso drinks other customers were ordering represented her entire food budget for the day. But she reminded herself that this meeting could be worth far more than the cost of a fancy latte. She found a table near the window, where she could watch for David's arrival while reviewing her handwritten notes about nonprofit funding strategies and program development. The notes represented weeks of research conducted during stolen moments. Between classes and work shifts, Maya had filled a composition notebook with information about successful financial literacy programs, foundation grant requirements, and case studies of organizations that had achieved sustainable funding while serving immigrant communities. She wasn't sure how much detail David would want to discuss, but Maya believed in being prepared for any conversation that might advance her understanding of how to transform her ideas into reality. David arrived exactly on time, scanning the cafe until he spotted Maya at her window table. He approached with the same purposeful stride she remembered from the library, carrying himself with the kind of confidence that suggested someone accustomed to navigating diverse environments and adapting quickly to different social contexts. Today, he wore a navy blue sweater and khakis, professional but approachable, and Maya noticed that several other customers glanced at him with the recognition people give to someone who belongs in leadership roles. "Maya," David said, extending his hand with a genuine smile, "thank you for making time for this. I've been looking forward to continuing our conversation." He gestured toward the counter. "Can I get you something? A pastry maybe, or something more substantial?" Maya politely declined, indicating her coffee, though she appreciated his thoughtfulness. David ordered a cappuccino and returned to the table, settling into his chair with the focused attention he had displayed during their first meeting. "I've been thinking about what you said regarding financial literacy programs," David began, pulling out a small notebook of his own. Maya was surprised to see that he had actually written down elements of their previous conversation, treating her ideas with the kind of systematic consideration she associated with serious business planning. You mentioned the gap between existing programs and the specific needs of immigrant families. Can you tell me more about what you've observed in terms of those unmet needs? Maya felt her nervousness ease as she recognized David's genuine interest. In her analysis, she opened her composition notebook and began sharing specific examples drawn from her grandmother's experiences and her observations of other families in their neighborhood. She described situations where well-meaning financial counselors had provided advice that was technically sound but culturally tone-deaf, failing to account for extended family financial obligations, different approaches to saving and spending, and the reality that many immigrants needed to support relatives in their countries of origin while building stability in America. For instance, Maya said, warming to her subject, most financial literacy programs emphasize building emergency savings accounts with 3 to 6 months of expenses. That's excellent advice for people whose financial obligations are limited to their immediate household. But many immigrant families are sending money home to support parents or siblings, or they're saving to bring other family members to the United States. A program that doesn't acknowledge those realities isn't going to be relevant to people's actual financial decisions. David nodded thoughtfully, taking notes as Maya spoke. That's exactly the kind of cultural competency that separates effective programs from well-intentioned ones that miss their mark, he said. Have you thought about how you design intake processes that identify those specific family financial dynamics? Because it seems like individualized planning would be crucial to making any program truly effective. Maya appreciated that David was pushing her thinking toward practical implementation details rather than just affirming her general observations. I think the key would be starting with community mapping, she said, referring to her notes. Instead of beginning with predetermined financial goals, I'd want to spend time in specific communities, understanding how families actually structure their financial priorities. Then the educational programming could be built around real decision-making frameworks, rather than abstract principles. Community mapping, David repeated, and Maya could see that he was processing this concept in the context of his own organizational experience. That sophisticated community development methodology, where did you encounter that approach? Maya felt a slight flush of pride that her research had impressed someone with David's background. I've been reading about participatory research methods and asset-based community development, Maya said. There's a lot of literature about how traditional social service delivery can be paternalistic if it doesn't start by understanding community strengths and existing resources. I think financial literacy education could fall into the same trap if it assumes that people don't already have effective money management strategies within their cultural contexts. David was quiet for a moment, studying Maya with an expression that suggested he was reassessing his initial impressions of her capabilities and sophistication. Maya, can I ask about your background? He said. Your approach to these issues is remarkably mature and well-researched. Have you had experience working in non-profit organizations, or is this primarily academic study? Maya felt a familiar uncertainty about how to present her limited professional experience in a way that accurately reflected her capabilities without overselling her resume. Most of my understanding comes from academic research and personal observation, she said honestly. I've volunteered with some community organizations, but I haven't had formal non-profit work experience. I've been focused on completing my degree and working enough hours to help support my grandmother and myself. Instead of seeming disappointed by Maya's lack of professional experience, David appeared more interested. So your insights are coming from lived experience combined with academic analysis, he said. That's actually a rare combination, and it's often more valuable than purely theoretical knowledge or professional experience without personal connection to the communities being served. Maya felt encouraged by David's positive response to what she had worried might be seen as limitations in her background. I think understanding the daily reality of financial stress and uncertainty helps me identify what kinds of support would actually be useful, she said. Academic research provides frameworks and evidence about what works, but personal experience helps me recognize when proposed solutions might not fit with how people actually live their lives. Exactly, David said, leaning forward with increased engagement. Maya, I want to share something with you about my own background because I think it might be relevant to your interests. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I started Veteran Solutions, Inc. because I understood from personal experience how difficult the transition from military to civilian life could be, especially for people who didn't have family connections or existing networks in the business world. Maya listened intently as David described his own journey from army service to business ownership, explaining how his understanding of veteran challenges had shaped his organization's approach to job training and placement services. He talked about the importance of programs designed by people who understood their target populations from the inside, rather than services created by well-meaning outsiders who might miss crucial cultural and practical considerations. The most effective social entrepreneurs, David continued, are usually people who have personal connections to the problems they're trying to solve. They understand not just the technical aspects of service delivery, but the emotional and cultural dimensions that determine whether programs actually meet people's needs. Your combination of personal experience, academic preparation, and genuine commitment to serving immigrant families puts you in an excellent position to create something truly innovative. Maya felt a growing sense of excitement as David's words validated her instinct that her background, rather than being a limitation, might actually be a strength in developing effective programs. I've wondered whether my personal connection to these issues might make me too close to them to be objective, she said, but I'm starting to think that the insider perspective might be essential for designing services that actually work. Absolutely, David said. The key is combining that insider perspective with rigorous program design and evaluation methods, which you're clearly developing through your academic work. Maya, can I ask what your timeline looks like for finishing your degree and beginning to implement some of these ideas? Maya calculated mentally, considering her course load and graduation requirements. I'll finish my bachelor's degree next spring, she said. I've been thinking about whether to pursue graduate school immediately or to try to gain some practical experience in non-profit management first. I'm also constrained by financial considerations. I'll need to be earning income relatively quickly after graduation to continue supporting my grandmother and to pay off my student loans. David nodded, understanding. Those are exactly the kinds of practical constraints that prevent a lot of promising social entrepreneurs from getting their ideas off the ground, he said. The traditional pathway of graduate school, followed by entry-level non-profit positions, doesn't work for people who need to be earning living wages while they develop their expertise. Maya was struck by how accurately David had identified the tension she felt between her career aspirations and her immediate financial responsibilities. Most career counselors and professors seem to assume that students had family financial support that would allow them to pursue unpaid internships or low-paid positions in their fields of interest. The reality of needing to generate income immediately after graduation, while still building toward longer-term goals, created a complex planning challenge that Maya hadn't seen addressed in any career development resources. Have you thought about alternative pathways that might allow you to begin working in your field while also meeting your financial needs? David asked. Maya appreciated that he was treating her economic constraints as legitimate factors to consider, rather than obstacles to overcome through willpower or sacrifice. I've looked at some fellowship programs that provide stipends for recent graduates working with non-profit organizations, Maya said. But most of them are designed for people who already have connections in the sector or who can afford to relocate. For specific opportunities, I need something that would let me stay in Portland to continue supporting my grandmother, and that would provide enough income to be sustainable. David was quiet for a moment, and Maya had the sense that he was considering something beyond their immediate conversation. Maya, what I'm about to suggest might seem unusual, he said, but I'd like you to consider it seriously. Veterans Solutions, Inc. has been exploring ways to expand our services to serve other populations who face similar transition challenges. Immigrant families in particular often deal with many of the same issues that veterans face, navigating unfamiliar systems, building professional networks, and accessing education and training opportunities. Maya felt her pulse quicken as she began to understand the direction of David's thinking. Are you suggesting some kind of partnership or program collaboration? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite her growing excitement. I'm suggesting something more substantial than collaboration, David said. I'm suggesting that you might be the right person to develop and lead a new division of Veteran Solutions focused specifically on financial literacy and economic empowerment for immigrant families. It would be your program, your vision, your leadership, but with the administrative support, funding infrastructure, and organizational capacity that already exists at Veteran Solutions. Maya stared at David, struggling to process the magnitude of what he was proposing. You're offering me a job? She said, her voice barely above a whisper. A leadership position. But I haven't even graduated yet, and I don't have any management experience. I'm offering you the opportunity to build something meaningful while earning a salary that would meet your financial needs, David said. Management experience can be developed, and we'd provide mentorship and training. What can't be taught is the combination of personal insight, academic preparation, and genuine commitment that you've demonstrated. Those are the qualities that determine whether a program succeeds or fails. Maya felt overwhelmed by the sudden transformation of her career, timeline, and possibilities. I don't know what to say, she said honestly. This is far beyond anything I imagined might be possible at this stage of my education and career. Why would you be willing to take such a risk on someone with so little professional experience? David reached into his wallet and withdrew a small photograph that he placed carefully on the table between them. The image showed two men in military uniforms standing in what appeared to be a desert landscape, both smiling despite the harsh environment. One of the men was clearly a much younger version of David. The other was a Hispanic soldier who appeared to be about Maya's current age. The other person in this photograph was Private Luis Rodriguez, David said quietly. He was killed by an improvised explosive device 3 years ago in Afghanistan. Before he died, Luis talked constantly about his sister who was studying business in college back home, working multiple jobs to support their grandmother while maintaining excellent grades. He was incredibly proud of her determination and character, and he made me promise that if anything happened to him, I would find her and help her achieve the goals he knew she was capable of reaching. Maya stared at the photograph, her mind racing as she began to understand the connection David was revealing. Rodriguez, she repeated softly. Luis Rodriguez was your... He was one of the finest soldiers I ever served with, David said. More than that, he was someone whose character and values reminded me daily of why our service mattered. Luis died, believing that his sister Maya was going to change the world through her work with immigrant families. I promised him that I would do everything in my power to help make that belief become reality. The cafe around them seemed to fade into background as Maya absorbed the revelation that connected her simple act of returning a lost wallet to a promise made on a battlefield half a world away. "You've been looking for me," she said, understanding beginning to dawn. "That's why you were so interested in my non-profit ideas. That's why you're offering me this opportunity." "I've been looking for Luis's sister for 3 years," David confirmed. "When you returned my wallet and then demonstrated exactly the kind of character and vision that Luis always described, I realized that the promise I made to him was finally going to be fulfilled. Maya, your brother believed in you completely, and everything I've seen confirms that his faith was justified." Maya felt tears welling in her eyes as she thought about her brother Luis, killed before she could tell him about her college achievements, her graduation plans, or her dreams of starting an organization that would help families like theirs. He had died believing in her potential, and now his sacrifice was creating opportunities she never could have imagined. "What happens now?" Maya asked, her voice thick with emotion. "If I accept this position, what would that mean practically?" David smiled, the expression mixing professional confidence with personal satisfaction at being able to honor his promise to a fallen soldier. "It means that next week, if you're ready, you start building the financial literacy program you've been dreaming about," David said. "It means you have funding, administrative support, and organizational infrastructure to create something that will serve hundreds of families. Most importantly, it means that Luis's belief in his sister's potential becomes the foundation for work that will honor his memory while changing countless lives." Maya looked at the photograph of her brother, then back at David, realizing that her quiet life of study and work had just been transformed by the most unexpected gift imaginable, the chance to pursue her dreams while honoring the sacrifice of someone who had never stopped believing in her capabilities. Maya spent the weekend in a state of emotional and intellectual whirlwind, alternating between tears for the brother she had lost and excitement about the opportunity his sacrifice had created. She found herself pulling out old photographs of Luis, remembering conversations they had shared about their dreams for their family's future, and marveling at how his faith in her had somehow reached across an ocean and 3 years of time to create this moment of possibility. Her grandmother, Elena Rodriguez, listened to Maya's account of the meeting with David with the kind of focused attention she reserved for truly significant news. At 74, Elena had developed the wisdom to recognize when life presented genuine opportunities versus mere wishful thinking, and she could see that David's offer represented the kind of breakthrough that might come once in a lifetime. "Mija," Elena said, holding Maya's hands in her own weathered ones, "Luis always knew you were destined for something important. He used to tell me that you had the mind of a businesswoman and the heart of a helper, and that combination would let you change the world. Maybe this is how God answers the prayers of soldiers who die believing in their families." Monday morning found Maya walking into the offices of Veteran Solutions, Inc. with a mixture of nervousness and determination that reminded her of her first day of college. David had suggested that she spend the week observing the organization's operations, meeting staff members, and beginning to understand how her financial literacy program might integrate with existing services. Maya wore her best professional outfit, a navy blue dress she had purchased for job interviews, paired with shoes that were comfortable enough for a full day on her feet. The receptionist, whose name Maya learned was Jennifer Martinez, greeted her with warm enthusiasm. "You must be Maya," Jennifer said. "David has told everyone about the exciting new program you'll be developing. I'm a veteran myself, and I can't wait to see how your work with immigrant families might complement what we're already doing for veterans who are also immigrants. There's definitely overlap in the populations we serve. Maya hadn't considered the intersection between veteran services and immigrant support, but Jennifer's observation immediately sparked ideas about how financial literacy programming could be designed to serve multiple communities with similar challenges. She made a mental note to explore this connection as she developed her program framework. David appeared promptly at 9 o'clock, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the kind of smile that suggested someone genuinely excited about a new project. "Ready for the grand tour?" he asked. "I thought we'd start by having you meet some of our program coordinators and get a sense of how we structure our services. Then this afternoon, I'd like to sit down with you and our finance director to talk about budget parameters for your program." The next few hours revealed the impressive scope and sophistication of Veteran Solutions Inc.'s operations. Maya met Sarah Kim, who coordinated job placement services and had helped over 300 veterans find employment in the past 2 years. She spoke with Marcus Washington, who managed the small business loan program and had facilitated funding for dozens of veteran-owned enterprises. She observed a job interview preparation workshop led by Amanda Torres, where veterans practiced presenting their military experience in terms that civilian employers could understand and value. What struck Maya most deeply was the organization's culture of dignity and empowerment. Rather than treating veterans as charity cases or people to be pitied, every program was designed to recognize and build upon the skills, leadership experience, and problem-solving capabilities that military service had developed. The staff consistently referred to veterans as clients rather than beneficiaries, and program materials emphasized opportunity and growth rather than need and assistance. "This is exactly the approach I want to take with immigrant families," Maya told David during a brief break between meetings. So many social service programs seem designed to reinforce the idea that people need to be rescued or fixed, rather than recognizing that they already have tremendous strengths and capabilities that might just need different contexts or additional resources to flourish. David nodded with obvious approval. "That's precisely why I knew you'd fit well with our organizational philosophy," he said. "The most effective programs are the ones that start by asking what people can do, rather than focusing on what they or can't do or don't have. It's a completely different foundation for service delivery, and it produces completely different outcomes." During lunch, Maya had the opportunity to speak informally with several staff members about their experiences working at Veteran Solutions Inc. She learned that David had created an organizational culture that prioritized professional development, collaborative decision-making, and innovation in program design. Employees talked about feeling supported to take risks, try new approaches, and learn from both successes and failures. "David hired most of us when we didn't have traditional qualifications for our positions," Sarah Kim explained. "He seems to have a talent for recognizing potential in people before they fully recognize it in themselves. But then he provides the training, mentorship, and resources we need to actually succeed in our roles. It's the kind of leadership that makes you want to exceed your own expectations." Maya appreciated this insight into David's management philosophy, as it helped her understand why he had been willing to offer her such a significant opportunity despite her limited professional experience. Rather than hiring people who already possessed all necessary skills, David appeared to prefer hiring people with the right character and values, then investing in their development. The afternoon meeting with David and the finance director, Carol Stevens, provided Maya with her first real glimpse into the business side of non-profit management. Carol walked her through budget categories, funding sources, and financial reporting requirements, explaining how program costs needed to be tracked and how success metrics were tied to funding renewal decisions. "For your financial literacy program," Carol said, "we'll want to establish clear outcomes that we can measure and report to funders. Have you thought about what success would look like in concrete terms? Number of families served, completion rates for educational programs, measurable, changes in financial behavior or stability. Maya realized she needed to translate her program vision into the kind of quantifiable objectives that would satisfy foundation funders and demonstrate organizational impact. I think we'd want to track multiple indicators, she said, drawing on her academic research. Immediate measures like program completion and participant satisfaction, intermediate measures like credit score improvements and savings account establishment, and longer-term measures like home ownership rates and small business development. Carol and David exchanged glances that suggested Maya's response had impressed them with its sophistication. That's exactly the kind of multi-level evaluation framework that serious funders want to see, Carol said. It shows that you understand the difference between activity measurement and impact measurement. Many non-profit programs struggle to move beyond counting how many people they serve to demonstrating how those people's lives actually improve. As the day progressed, Maya found herself feeling increasingly confident about her ability to contribute meaningfully to Veteran Solutions Inc.'s mission while developing her own area of expertise. The organization's existing infrastructure, administrative systems, financial management, program evaluation processes, and community partnerships would allow her to focus on program design and implementation rather than spending months establishing basic operational capacity. But Maya also began to understand the magnitude of the responsibility David was offering her. Veteran Solutions Inc. had a reputation for excellence and innovation in the non-profit sector, and any new program would be expected to meet the same standards of professionalism and effectiveness that had made the organization successful. The financial literacy program would reflect not just on Maya's capabilities, but on the organization's judgment and commitment to quality service delivery. During a late afternoon conversation in David's office, Maya found herself asking the question that had been weighing on her mind all day. David, I understand why Luis's request motivated you to look for me, and I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity, she said. But I need to know that you're offering me this position because you genuinely believe I can succeed in it, not just because you made a promise to my brother. I don't want to be a charity case or a symbolic gesture. David leaned back in his chair, considering his response carefully. Maya, if I thought you weren't capable of excelling in this role, I wouldn't have offered it to you regardless of any promise I made to Luis, he said. This organization's success depends on hiring people who can deliver real results for the communities we serve. I can't afford to make hiring decisions based on sentiment or obligation. Maya felt relieved by David's direct response, but she needed to understand more about his assessment of her capabilities. What makes you confident that I can handle this level of responsibility? She asked. I appreciate your faith in me, but I want to understand the concrete factors that inform your decision. David pulled out a legal pad on which Maya could see he had been taking notes throughout their interactions. First, your analytical approach to program design demonstrates genuine understanding of community development principles, he said. Second, your academic preparation has given you theoretical frameworks that most practitioners lack. Third, your personal experience with the target population provides insights that can't be learned in graduate school or professional development workshops. Maya appreciated that David was providing specific, professional justifications for his decision, rather than generic encouragement. But most importantly, David continued, your approach to returning my wallet demonstrated exactly the kind of character and judgment that effective leaders need. You saw a problem, analyzed the best solution, and took action that required you to step outside your comfort zone in service of doing what was right. That's precisely the decision-making process that successful program managers use every day. Maya felt a growing sense of confidence as David articulated the connection between her personal qualities and professional capabilities. "I think I understand," she said. "You're saying that leadership skills are transferable across contexts, and that the character traits that led me to return your wallet are the same ones that would make me effective in program management." "Exactly," David said. "Technical skills can be taught, and we'll provide extensive training in non-profit management, program evaluation, fundraising, and community outreach. But integrity, initiative, and commitment to service can't be taught. Either someone has those qualities, or they don't. You've demonstrated that you do." As Maya prepared to leave the office at the end of her first day, David handed her a thick folder containing program materials, funding proposals, and organizational documents. "These will give you a better sense of how we approach program development," he said. "Take your time reviewing them, and don't hesitate to call or email if you have questions. We'll spend the rest of this week getting you oriented, and then you can begin developing your specific program proposal." Maya accepted the folder with a sense of ceremony, recognizing that she was crossing a threshold from student to professional, from dreamer to implementer. "David, I want you to know how much this means to me," she said. "Not just the job opportunity, but the chance to honor Luis's memory through work that he would have been proud of. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," David said simply. "Luis was right about you, Maya. He saw something special long before the rest of us had the chance to recognize it. Now you get to prove that his faith was justified." Walking to the bus stop that evening, Maya felt like she was seeing her city with new eyes. The homeless individuals she passed reminded her of program participants who might benefit from financial literacy education. The small businesses she observed sparked ideas about partnerships and program sites. The immigrant families waiting at bus stops looked like potential community members she might have the privilege of serving through her work. But more than anything, Maya felt connected to her brother Luis in a way she hadn't experienced since learning of his death. His sacrifice had seemed so far removed from her daily life of classes and part-time work, but now she understood that his death had created a legacy that would touch hundreds of families over the coming years. The financial literacy program she was about to develop would be Luis's gift to their community, delivered through her hands, but inspired by his unwavering belief in her potential. That evening, Maya called her grandmother to share the details of her first day at Veteran Solutions, Inc. Elena listened with the kind of deep attention that Maya had learned to associate with her grandmother's most important conversations. When Maya finished describing the day's events, Elena was quiet for a long moment. "Misha," Elena finally said, "today you became the woman Luis always knew you could be. Tomorrow you begin the work that will make both of your dreams come true." Maya realized that her grandmother was right. She was no longer preparing for her future career, she was living it. The shy college student who had returned a lost wallet just 1 week earlier had transformed into a program director with the resources and support to create meaningful change in her community. The transformation had begun, not just for Maya, but for everyone whose life would be touched by the program she was about to build. Luis's promise was becoming reality. One conversation, one meeting, one day at a time. 3 weeks into her new role at Veteran Solutions, Inc., Maya had settled into a routine that balanced intensive learning with creative program development. Her days began at 7:30 with careful review of non-profit management resources David had provided, followed by meetings with staff members who were sharing their expertise in community outreach, program evaluation, and service delivery. The afternoons were dedicated to developing her financial literacy curriculum, researching potential community partnerships, and beginning to understand the complex landscape of foundation funding and grant writing. Maya's small office on the 14th floor had become a testament to her systematic approach to program development. The walls were covered with flowcharts mapping immigrant community demographics, timelines for program implementation, and detailed outlines of educational modules that would address everything from basic banking to small business development. Her desk held neat stacks of research articles, funding opportunity announcements, and contact information for community organizations that might serve as program partners. But Maya was also discovering that program development involved challenges she hadn't anticipated during her academic study of nonprofit management. The theoretical framework she had learned in college provided excellent foundations for understanding community needs and program design. But translating those theories into operational plans required navigation of regulatory requirements, insurance, considerations, and administrative complexities that no textbook had adequately prepared her for. "This is completely normal," David assured her during one of their weekly check-in meetings. "The gap between academic preparation and practical implementation is something every new non-profit professional encounters. The key is building systems and partnerships that allow you to focus on program content while others handle operational details, at least initially." Maya appreciated David's realistic perspective on the learning curve she was experiencing, but she also felt pressure to demonstrate that his faith in her capabilities was justified. She had been hired to create something innovative and effective, and she wanted to prove that she could deliver results that would honor both Luis's memory and Veteran Solutions Inc.'s reputation for excellence. One particular challenge was becoming increasingly apparent as Maya deepened her understanding of the immigrant communities she intended to serve. Her initial research had focused primarily on financial literacy needs, but conversations with community leaders were revealing that economic empowerment required addressing interconnected issues that went far beyond basic money management education. During a meeting with Rosa Delgado, director of a community center that served primarily Latino immigrant families, Maya learned about the complex web of challenges that affected families' financial stability. "Financial literacy is crucial," Rosa explained, "but many of our families are dealing with immigration status issues that limit their access to traditional banking services, employment discrimination that keeps them in low-wage jobs, and housing instability that makes it difficult to plan for the future." Maya realized that her program would need to address these systemic barriers while providing education about financial management, or risk offering advice that sounded helpful in theory but couldn't be implemented given the realities of participants' lives. This recognition led her to expand her program framework to include partnership with legal aid organizations, advocacy for inclusive banking policies, and collaboration with employment programs that could help participants access better-paying jobs. "You're discovering the difference between addressing symptoms and addressing root causes," David observed when Maya shared her evolving understanding of program requirements. "The most effective social programs are the ones that tackle multiple barriers simultaneously rather than assuming that education alone will solve complex problems." Maya's conversations with potential program participants were providing even more nuanced insights into the cultural and practical considerations that would determine her program's effectiveness. During focus groups organized by Rosa's community center, Maya heard repeatedly that financial advice needed to account for extended family obligations, different cultural approaches to saving and spending, and the reality that many immigrant families were building financial stability in two countries simultaneously. "My husband sends money to his parents every month," explained Carmen Morales, a participant in one of Maya's focus groups. Financial advisors always tell us to build emergency savings first, but we can't ignore our family responsibilities. We need programs that help us balance all of our obligations, not programs that tell us to choose between helping our families and building our own security. These conversations were pushing Maya to develop programming that was more sophisticated and culturally responsive than anything she had initially envisioned. Rather than simply adapting existing financial literacy curricula for Spanish-speaking audiences, Maya realized she needed to create educational approaches that honored participants' existing knowledge and values while providing tools for navigating American financial systems. The complexity of this challenge was both daunting and energizing. Maya found herself working longer hours than she had ever sustained, but with an intellectual engagement that made the work feel more like exploration than obligation. She was discovering that effective program development required constant iteration. Between research, community input, expert consultation, and creative problem-solving, David had connected Maya with Dr. Elena Vasquez, a professor at Portland State University who specialized in culturally responsive adult education. Their weekly conversations were helping Maya understand how to design learning experiences that built upon participants' existing knowledge rather than assuming they were starting from zero financial understanding. Many immigrant families have sophisticated informal financial systems, Dr. Vasquez explained during one of their consultations. Rotating credit associations, extended family support networks, and community-based mutual aid are all forms of financial management that demonstrate considerable sophistication. Your program should acknowledge and build upon these existing strengths rather than treating participants as if they don't understand money management. This perspective was transforming Maya's approach to curriculum development. Instead of starting with basic concepts like budgeting and saving, Maya decided to begin her program modules by exploring the financial strategies participants were already using, then introducing complementary tools that could enhance their existing approaches. This framework honored participants' knowledge while providing practical skills for navigating formal financial institutions. Maya's growing expertise was also creating opportunities for her to contribute to Veteran Solutions Inc.'s existing programs in ways she hadn't expected. During a staff meeting focused on services for immigrant veterans, Maya was able to offer insights about cultural competency that enhanced the organization's ability to serve clients who were navigating both veteran transition challenges and immigrant integration issues. Maya's perspective is helping us understand how military benefits and services need to be explained differently for veterans who may not be familiar with American social service systems, Sarah Kim observed. She's making all of our programs more effective by helping us think about cultural responsiveness more systematically. Maya felt proud that her work was benefiting the organization beyond her specific program area. But she also recognized that her growing visibility within Veteran Solutions Inc. was creating new expectations and responsibilities. David had begun including her in strategic planning meetings and asking for her input on organizational decisions that went beyond financial literacy programming. "I want you to understand how this organization operates at every level," David explained when Maya expressed some uncertainty about her expanding role. "The financial literacy program is just the beginning of what I hope will be a long career in nonprofit leadership for you. The more you understand about organizational management, funding development, and strategic planning, the more effective you'll be in whatever leadership positions you pursue." Maya appreciated David's investment in her professional development, but she sometimes felt overwhelmed by the pace at which her responsibilities and expertise were expanding. 3 months earlier, she had been a college student focused primarily on completing assignments and managing her part-time job. Now she was developing multifaceted programming, managing community partnerships, and contributing to organizational strategy discussions that would affect hundreds of program participants. The transformation was particularly evident during Maya's interactions with her former classmates and professors. When she returned to campus to complete her final semester requirements, Maya found that her perspectives on non-profit management had evolved far beyond what academic coursework had provided. She was now speaking from practical experience about challenges and opportunities that she had previously understood only theoretically. Professor Martinez, who taught Maya's non-profit management capstone course, invited her to present a guest lecture about program development and community partnership building. Standing in front of the classroom where she had been a student just months earlier, Maya realized how dramatically her confidence and expertise had grown through hands-on experience with real program implementation challenges. "The most important thing I've learned," Maya told her former classmates, "is that effective non-profit work requires constant adaptation based on community feedback and changing circumstances. You can't just design a program in an office and expect it to work perfectly when you implement it. Success requires ongoing relationship building, continuous learning, and willingness to modify your approaches based on what participants actually need." After her presentation, several students approached Maya with questions about career opportunities in non-profit management and advice about translating academic preparation into practical skills. Maya found herself in the unexpected position of being someone whose experience others wanted to learn from, a role that felt both gratifying and humbling. But Maya's expanding professional responsibilities were also creating some personal challenges that she was still learning to navigate. The demands of program development, community outreach, and organizational meetings left little time for the quiet study and reflection that had always been central to her academic success. She missed the solitary focus of library research and the predictable rhythms of coursework and exams. More significantly, Maya was discovering that leadership roles required types of communication and self-advocacy that didn't come naturally to someone who had spent years perfecting the art of academic invisibility. Program development required her to present ideas confidently, negotiate with community partners, and advocate for resources in ways that demanded comfort with being the center of attention. "Leadership is always uncomfortable at first," David, and counseled when Maya shared her struggles with these new demands. "The skills that make someone an excellent student are different from the skills that make someone an effective leader, and learning to use your voice in professional settings takes practice. But Maya, you have important perspectives that communities need to hear. Part of honoring Luisa's memory is finding the courage to share your insights even when it feels uncomfortable." Maya's relationship with her grandmother Elena was also evolving as Maya's professional responsibilities expanded. Elena had always been Maya's primary source of emotional support and practical wisdom. But now, Maya found herself sharing experiences that her grandmother couldn't fully relate to from her own life history. The challenge of balancing respect for Elena's guidance with confidence in her own professional judgment was creating new dynamics in their relationship. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel Media. You are becoming the woman I always prayed you would become, Elena told Maya during one of their evening conversations. But remember that success means nothing if you lose the values that make you who you are. Help people, honor your family, and stay connected to your community, no matter how important your work becomes. Elena's wisdom helped Maya maintain perspective about the ultimate purposes of her expanding career opportunities. The financial literacy program wasn't just about demonstrating her professional capabilities or building veteran solutions in-kind's reputation. It was about creating real change in the lives of families who faced many of the same challenges that Maya and Elena had navigated throughout their own journey in America. As Maya prepared for the official launch of her financial literacy program, now scheduled for the following month, she reflected on how completely her life had been transformed by the simple decision to return David's wallet. The shy college student, who had been afraid to approach successful professionals, was now designing innovative programming and managing complex community partnerships. The young woman, who had worried about whether her dreams were realistic, was now implementing those dreams with organizational support and community investment. But most importantly, Maya was beginning to understand that Luis's sacrifice had created something far more significant than just career opportunities for his sister. The financial literacy program represented a legacy that would touch hundreds of families over the coming years, providing tools and resources that could break cycles of economic instability and create pathways to prosperity that might not have existed otherwise. Maya's transformation was just beginning, but already she could see how personal growth and professional success could serve purposes larger than individual achievement. She was becoming the leader that Luis had always believed she could be, while creating programs that would honor his memory through service to their community. The promise David had made to a dying soldier was becoming reality through Maya's courage to accept challenges that initially seemed beyond her capabilities. The revelation came on a Thursday morning in late February, delivered through a phone call that would forever alter Maya's understanding of her relationship with David and Veteran Solutions, Inc. Maya had arrived at the office early, as had become her habit, to review participant registration forms for the financial literacy program's pilot launch, scheduled for the following week. The morning sun streamed through her office windows, illuminating the carefully organized materials that represented months of preparation and community outreach. Maya's phone rang just as she was finalizing the agenda for the program's opening session. The caller identified herself as Jessica Chen, a reporter with the Portland Business Journal who was researching a story about innovative non-profit organizations. Maya assumed the call was routine media outreach and prepared to provide standard information about Veteran Solutions Inc.'s services and community impact. "I'm particularly interested in the ownership structure of Veteran Solutions Inc., Jessica said, her tone suggesting she was following a specific line of inquiry. "Our research indicates that David Park has been gradually transferring ownership shares to employees and community partners over the past several years. Can you tell me about your role in that process?" Maya felt confused by the question, unsure what Jessica meant by ownership transfers or why Maya would have any involvement in such matters. "I'm sorry, but I think there might be some misunderstanding," Maya said carefully. "I'm a program director here, not involved in ownership or governance decisions. You'd need to speak with David Park or our board of directors about organizational structure." Jessica paused, and Maya could hear papers rustling in the background. According to incorporation documents filed last week with the Oregon Secretary of State, Maya Rodriguez is listed as receiving a 40% ownership stake in Veteran Solutions, Inc. Are you saying you weren't aware of this transfer? Maya felt the room spin slightly as she processed Jessica's words. Ownership stake, 40%. Her name on legal documents she had never seen or signed. "I think there's been some mistake," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't own any part of this organization. I'm an employee who was hired 3 months ago." "Ms. Rodriguez, I'm reading directly from public records," Jessica continued, now sounding concerned about Maya's apparent confusion. "The documents indicate that David Park has transferred majority ownership of Veteran Solutions, Inc. to you, effective immediately. These filings typically require signatures from all parties involved. Are you certain you haven't signed any ownership transfer agreements? Maya's mind raced back through the past 3 months, trying to remember every document David had asked her to sign. There had been employment agreements, benefits enrollment forms, program development contracts, and various administrative paperwork that she had signed as part of her orientation process. Had one of those documents contained ownership transfer, language that she hadn't understood or noticed? "I need to call you back," Maya said, ending the conversation before Jessica could ask additional questions. Maya sat in her office chair, staring at her computer screen without seeing it, trying to make sense of what she had just learned. David had apparently given her ownership of the company without her knowledge or understanding. The implications were staggering and completely beyond anything she had imagined when she accepted the position as program director. Maya's first instinct was to march directly to David's office and demand an explanation, but she forced herself to think systematically about the situation before confronting him. If Jessica's information was accurate, Maya needed to understand what ownership of a non-profit organization actually meant, what responsibilities and liabilities might be involved, and why David would have made such a transfer without discussing it with her explicitly. She spent the next hour researching non-profit ownership structures, discovering that David had apparently converted Veteran Solutions, Inc. from a traditional non-profit corporation to a more unusual structure that allowed for employee ownership while maintaining tax-exempt status. The complexity of the legal arrangements was far beyond Maya's understanding, but it was clear that David had been planning this transition for months, possibly years. When Maya finally knocked on David's office door, she felt a mixture of betrayal, confusion, and anger that reminded her uncomfortably of how she had felt when learning about Marcus's infidelity years earlier. Once again, someone she trusted had been making major decisions that affected her life without including her in the process. "Maya," David said, looking up from his computer with the kind of expression that suggested he had been expecting this conversation. "I assume Jessica Chen called you this morning. I was hoping to have a chance to explain the ownership transfer before the media picked up on the public filings." Maya closed the office door behind her and sat down in the chair across from David's desk, trying to maintain professional composure despite her emotional turmoil. "David, I need you to explain what's happening," she said. "According to a reporter, I apparently own 40% of this organization, which is news to me. How is that possible? And why would you make such a significant decision without discussing it with me?" David leaned back in his chair, choosing his words carefully. "Maya, everything I've done has been in service of honoring the promise I made to Luis and ensuring that you have the resources and authority necessary to build the kind of programs you've envisioned," he said. "But you're right that I should have been more transparent about my plans from the beginning." Maya felt her frustration building as David seemed to be justifying his secrecy rather than acknowledging the problematic nature of making major legal decisions without her informed consent. "David, you can't just give someone ownership of a company without their knowledge," she said, her voice rising slightly. "What if I don't want this responsibility? What if I'm not ready for it? What if there are legal or financial obligations?" "I don't understand," David nodded, acknowledging the validity of Maya's concerns. "You're absolutely right to be upset about the process," he said. "I handled this poorly by not involving you in the decision-making from the beginning. But Maya, I need you to understand the reasoning behind this transfer, because it connects directly to Luis's story and the promise I made to him." Maya felt torn between her anger about David's secretive approach and her curiosity about how this ownership transfer related to her brother's sacrifice. "I'm listening," she said, "but David, this conversation needs to include a plan for undoing this transfer if I decide I don't want the ownership responsibility." David pulled out a thick legal folder from his desk drawer, opening it to reveal documents that Maya recognized as some of the paperwork she had signed during her employment orientation. 3 months ago, when you signed your employment agreement, there was a clause indicating that your position included potential equity participation in organizational ownership, David said. The language was intentionally vague because I wanted to see how you performed in the role before making the transfer official. Maya stared at the documents, trying to remember whether she had read every clause of her employment agreement thoroughly. She had been so focused on the opportunity to develop her financial literacy program that she might have skimmed sections that seemed like standard legal language. David, even if I signed something that mentioned equity participation, that doesn't mean I understood or consented to receiving 40% ownership of the entire organization. You're absolutely right, David said. And that's why I'm prepared to reverse the transfer if you decide you don't want the ownership responsibility. But Maya, before you make that decision, I need to tell you the complete story of what I promised, Luis, and why I believe this ownership structure is essential to fulfilling that promise. Maya felt her resolve softening slightly as David returned to the subject of her brother, but she maintained her focus on the immediate problem of unwanted legal responsibility. I'll listen to the complete story, she said, but I need you to understand that I feel betrayed by your approach to this decision. You've been making plans that affect my entire future without giving me the information I needed to make informed choices. David's expression showed genuine regret as he acknowledged Maya's feelings. Maya, you're right to feel betrayed, and I take full responsibility for handling this situation poorly, he said. I was so focused on creating opportunities for you that I lost sight of the importance of including you in decisions that affect your life. That was wrong, regardless of my intentions. Maya appreciated David's acknowledgement of his mistakes, but she still needed to understand the full scope of what he had done and why. Tell me about Luis, she said. Help me understand how this ownership transfer connects to the promise you made to him. David opened the legal folder more fully, revealing not just employment documents, but also military records, personal letters, and photographs that Maya hadn't seen before. Luis talked constantly about wanting to start a non-profit organization that would serve immigrant families, David said. He had specific ideas about financial literacy, job training, and community development that were remarkably similar to what you've been developing here. Maya felt a chill of recognition as David described her brother's dreams, realizing that her own non-profit aspirations might have been more influenced by Luis's vision than she had understood. He wanted to start his own organization, she asked. He never mentioned that in his letters to me. Luis was planning to use his GI Bill benefits to study non-profit management after his deployment, David continued. He had been saving money to contribute as startup capital for an organization that would be owned and operated by the communities it served, rather than by outside funders or traditional non-profit boards. He believed that community ownership was essential to creating programs that would truly serve people's needs. Maya began to understand the connection between Luis's vision and David's ownership transfer, but she still felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of responsibility that David had assumed she wanted. So you're saying that giving me ownership of Veteran Solutions, Inc. is your way of fulfilling Luis's dream of community-owned organizations? I'm saying that Luis's vision was to create sustainable, community-controlled resources for immigrant families, David said. Veteran Solutions, Inc. has the infrastructure, funding relationships, and operational capacity that could take decades to build from scratch. By transferring ownership to you, I'm providing the foundation Luis dreamed of building himself. Maya appreciated the idealistic vision that David was describing, but she remained focused on the practical implications of ownership responsibility. David, even if this ownership transfer honors Luis's memory, I'm not sure I'm ready for the legal and financial obligations that come with owning a business, she said. What if I make mistakes that damage the organization or put employees' jobs at risk? David nodded understandingly. Maya, that's exactly why the ownership transfer includes extensive mentorship and transition support, he said. I'm not disappearing from the organization. I'm shifting from primary owner to senior advisor and co-owner. You'll have full decision-making authority, but you'll also have access to my experience and the existing management team. Maya felt slightly relieved that David wasn't expecting her to assume complete responsibility immediately, but she still wasn't convinced that ownership was the right arrangement for her current level of experience. What would happen if I decided I wanted to remain as program director without taking ownership? She asked. Could we structure my role differently? Of course, David said immediately. Maya, I want to be absolutely clear that your employment and your authority to develop programs aren't contingent on accepting ownership. If you prefer to remain as program director with the same responsibilities you have now, we can dissolve the ownership transfer and continue with our current arrangement. Maya felt grateful for David's willingness to respect her preferences, but she was also beginning to understand that the ownership question involved more than just her personal comfort level. David, help me understand what ownership would actually mean in practical terms, she said. What decisions would I be responsible for, and what support would be available to help me make those decisions effectively? David spent the next hour walking Maya through the specific responsibilities and authorities that ownership would entail, explaining how non-profit governance worked and what kinds of decisions required owner approval versus staff-level management. Maya learned that ownership would give her authority over budget priorities, program development, hiring decisions, and strategic planning, but that day-to-day operations would continue to be managed by the existing staff team. The most important change, David explained, is that ownership would give you the security of knowing that the organization's mission and values can't be changed by external funders or board members who might have different priorities. You would have the authority to ensure that Veteran Solutions, Inc. continues to serve communities in ways that honor Luis's vision and your own values. Maya began to see that ownership might actually provide protection for the financial literacy program and other services rather than just creating additional responsibility. With ownership authority, she could ensure that programs remained focused on community needs rather than being shaped by funding requirements that might not align with effective service delivery. I need time to think about this, Maya said finally. David, I appreciate that your intentions were good, but I need to make this decision based on my own assessment of what's right for me and for the communities we serve. Can you give me a week to consider the options? Of course, David said. Maya, whatever you decide, I want you to know that I believe Luis would be incredibly proud of what you've already accomplished here. The ownership question is just about structure. The important work you're doing will continue regardless of how we organize the legal arrangements. Maya left David's office feeling emotionally drained, but also more informed about her options and the reasoning behind David's decisions. She had a week to decide whether to accept ownership of an organization worth millions of dollars or to maintain her current role as program director. Either choice would honor Luis's memory, but each option carried different responsibilities and opportunities for future impact. The shy college student who had returned a lost wallet 4 months earlier was now being asked to make decisions that would affect hundreds of employees and thousands of program participants. Maya realized that regardless of her choice about ownership, she had already been transformed into someone capable of leadership responsibilities she never could have imagined. Maya spent the weekend walking through the neighborhoods that would be served by her financial literacy program, visiting the community centers and churches where she had conducted focus groups, and talking with the families who had shared their stories and dreams with her over the past 3 months. She needed to understand not just what ownership would mean for her personally, but what it would mean for the communities that Veteran Solutions, Inc. served. Saturday morning found Maya at Rosa Delgado's community center, where she had first begun to understand the complex challenges facing immigrant families. Rosa had become both a program partner and a trusted advisor, someone whose judgment Maya valued precisely because it was rooted in decades of community service rather than academic theory or business success. "Rosa, can I ask you something about leadership and responsibility?" Maya said, as they sat in Rosa's small office, surrounded by photographs of families who had participated in the center's programs over the years. "If you had the opportunity to control resources that could benefit your community, but taking that control meant accepting risks and responsibilities you weren't sure you were ready for, how would you make that decision?" Rosa studied Maya with the kind of attention that suggested she understood this wasn't a hypothetical question. "Mija, leadership isn't about feeling ready," Rosa said thoughtfully. "It's about recognizing when you have the opportunity to serve something bigger than yourself and finding the courage to step into that role even when it scares you. The question isn't whether you're ready. The question is whether your community needs you to be ready." Maya appreciated Rosa's perspective, but she was still struggling with the magnitude of the responsibility David was offering her. "What if I make mistakes that hurt people who are depending on the organization's services?" Maya asked. "What if my inexperience leads to problems that damage programs other people have built?" Rosa leaned forward, her expression mixing compassion with directness. "Maya, do you think the people who are running organizations and making decisions about our communities now don't make mistakes?" she asked. "The difference is that most of them don't live in our neighborhoods, don't understand our challenges from personal experience, and don't have to live with the consequences of their decisions. You would be making decisions as someone who belongs to the communities you serve." Maya had never considered the advantages of her background and personal experience as qualifications for leadership, but Rosa's observation made her think about how different her decision-making process might be from that of traditional non-profit leaders. "You're saying that my connection to the community might be more important than my lack of management experience?" "I'm saying that your connection to the community, combined with your education and your commitment to learning, makes you exactly the kind of leader our families need," Rosa said. "Maya, I've watched you develop programs over the past 3 months. You listen to people, you adapt your plans based on what you learn, and you never forget that your work is about serving real families with real needs. Those are the qualities that matter most in leadership." Sunday afternoon, Maya visited her uncle Roberto, Luis's closest friend in the family, and someone whose judgment she had always respected. Roberto had served in the military before Luis, and his perspective on service and sacrifice had helped shape both of his younger relatives' understanding of duty and commitment. "Tio," Maya said as they sat in Roberto's backyard, "I need to make a decision about something important, and I want to understand what Luis would have wanted me to do." She explained the ownership opportunity and her uncertainty about accepting such significant responsibility so early in her career. Roberto listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding as Maya described the program she had developed and the potential impact of owning versus directing the organization. When she finished, he was quiet for several minutes, considering his response with the care Maya had learned to associate with his most important advice. "Maya, Your brother believed that people from our communities needed to control the resources and organizations that served our families, Roberto said finally. He was tired of being grateful for services designed by people who didn't understand our lives. Luis wanted to build something that belonged to the community, not just served. Maya felt a deepening understanding of how the ownership opportunity connected to Luis's vision for community empowerment. "So you think I should accept the ownership transfer?" she asked, "even though it feels overwhelming?" "I think you should ask yourself what Luis would do if he were in your position," Roberto said. "Would he let fear of making mistakes prevent him from accepting the opportunity to build something meaningful? Or would he find the courage to step into leadership because his community needed him to be brave?" Roberto's question helped Maya reframe her decision-making process. Instead of focusing on whether she felt ready for ownership responsibility, Maya began thinking about whether accepting that responsibility would honor Luis's sacrifice and serve the families who were depending on Veteran Solutions Inc.'s programs. Monday morning, Maya arrived at the office with a different perspective on her decision. She spent the day observing the organization's operations with new eyes, paying attention to how decisions were made, how problems were solved, and how staff members interacted with community partners and program participants. Maya noticed that David's leadership style involved extensive consultation with staff members, systematic research before making major decisions, and consistent prioritization of community needs over organizational convenience. She realized that taking ownership wouldn't require her to make decisions in isolation. It would give her the authority to maintain and strengthen the collaborative approach that made Veteran Solutions Inc. effective. During lunch, Maya had a conversation with Sarah Kim that provided additional insight into the advantages of community-centered ownership. "Maya, one of the things that makes this organization special is that David has always prioritized mission over profit," Sarah said. "But a lot of nonprofits lose that focus when they grow larger or when funding pressures force them to compromise their values. If you own the organization, you can ensure that community service remains the central priority." Maya hadn't considered how ownership might protect the organization's mission from external pressures, but Sarah's observation made her realize that accepting ownership could be a form of stewardship rather than just personal advancement. "You think ownership would actually help me serve the community more effectively?" Maya asked. "I think ownership would give you the authority to make decisions based on what communities need, rather than what funders want or what looks good in annual reports," Sarah said. "That's exactly the kind of leadership that organizations like ours need to remain effective as they grow." Tuesday evening, Maya had dinner with her grandmother, Elena, sharing the details of her decision-making process and asking for the wisdom that had guided their family through decades of challenges and opportunities. Elena listened with the deep attention she reserved for conversations that would shape family history. "Mija, when I came to this country, people told me I should be grateful for any job, any opportunity, any chance to improve our family's situation," Elena said. "But your grandfather taught me that gratitude and ambition aren't opposites. You can be grateful for opportunities while also believing you deserve to build something significant." Maya felt tears welling as she understood her grandmother's message. "You're saying I shouldn't let fear or humility prevent me from accepting this responsibility." "I'm saying that Luis died believing his sister would change the world," Elena said firmly. "He didn't die hoping you would find a nice job or be grateful for small opportunities. He died believing you would build something that would serve thousands of families for generations. Don't let his sacrifice be smaller than his dreams." Elena's words crystallized something in Maya's thinking that had been developing throughout her week of reflection. The ownership opportunity wasn't just about her personal career or even her individual readiness for leadership. It was about honoring Luis's vision for community empowerment and ensuring that his sacrifice created lasting change. Wednesday morning, Maya requested a meeting with David to discuss her decision. She arrived at his office with a legal pad filled with questions about operational details, transition planning, and support structures that would help her succeed in an ownership role. "David, I've decided to accept the ownership transfer," Maya said, "but I need to understand exactly how we'll structure the transition to ensure that I have the support and mentorship necessary to make good decisions for the organization and the communities we serve." David's relief was evident, but Maya appreciated that he immediately focused on practical planning rather than celebrating her decision. "Maya, I'm thrilled that you're willing to take on this responsibility," he said. "Let's spend today mapping out a transition plan that gives you increasing decision-making authority over the next 6 months, while ensuring you have access to experienced guidance." They spent the morning developing a detailed plan that would gradually shift leadership responsibilities to Maya while maintaining David's involvement as a senior advisor and co-owner. Maya would begin by taking primary responsibility for program development and community partnerships, then gradually assume authority over budget management, strategic planning, and organizational governance. "The most important thing," David explained, "is that you feel confident in your decision-making at each stage of the transition. We'll move at whatever pace allows you to build expertise while maintaining the organization's effectiveness." Maya appreciated David's commitment to supporting her success, but she also wanted to establish clear expectations about her own leadership priorities. "David, I need you to understand that accepting ownership means I'll be making decisions based on community needs rather than traditional business metrics," she said. "I want to ensure that's compatible with your vision for the organization." "Maya, that's exactly why I believe you're the right person for this responsibility," David said. "The most successful social organizations are the ones led by people who understand their communities from the inside and make decisions based on authentic service rather than external expectations." Thursday and Friday were spent in intensive meetings with the organization's legal counsel, financial advisors, and board members, all of whom needed to understand and approve the ownership transition. Maya was impressed by the thoroughness of the due diligence process and the care that David had taken to ensure that the transfer would protect both her interests and the organization's stability. By Friday afternoon, Maya had signed the legal documents that made her the majority owner of Veteran Solutions, Inc., with David retaining a minority ownership stake and continuing as senior advisor. The transaction felt surreal. 4 months. Earlier, Maya had been a college student worried about affording textbooks, and now she owned an organization worth several $million. But more importantly than the financial value of the ownership transfer, Maya understood that she now had the authority and resources to build the kind of programs that could transform lives in her community. The financial literacy initiative that had started as a class project was now backed by organizational infrastructure that could scale innovative programming to serve thousands of families. "Maya," David said as they finished signing the final documents, "Luis would be incredibly proud of the leader you've become and the courage you've shown in accepting this responsibility. But I think he'd be most proud that you made this decision based on what would best serve your community, rather than what felt safest for yourself." Maya felt the weight of ownership settling on her shoulders, but it was a weight that felt purposeful rather than burdensome. She was no longer just a program director or even a senior staff member. She was now responsible for ensuring that Veteran Solutions, Inc. continued to serve veterans and immigrant families with the excellence and innovation that had made the organization successful. That evening, Maya called Luis's army unit to speak with soldiers who had served with her brother. She wanted them to know that the promise David had made was being fulfilled, and that Luis's sacrifice was creating opportunities for service that would honor his memory for decades to come. "Ma'am," said Sergeant Martinez, who had been Luis's closest friend in the unit, "Private Rodriguez talked about you all the time. He always said his sister was going to run the world someday. Sounds like he was right." Maya realized that accepting ownership of Veteran Solutions, Inc. was just the beginning of her journey as a leader, but it was a beginning that felt worthy of Luis's faith in her potential. The shy college student who had returned a lost wallet was now the owner of an organization that could create lasting change in communities across the region. The transformation was complete, but the real work was just beginning. Maya had the tools, resources, and authority to build the kind of programs that could honor her brother's sacrifice while serving thousands of families. Now she needed to prove that Luis's belief in her capabilities had been justified by creating something that would make a difference for generations to come. 2 years later, Maya stood before a packed auditorium at the Portland Convention Center, addressing the National Conference on Immigrant Economic Empowerment. The shy college student, who had once been afraid to speak up in class, was now delivering a keynote presentation to non-profit leaders, policymakers, and community organizers from across the country. The transformation felt surreal, but Maya had learned that growth often happened gradually until suddenly you realized you had become someone completely different. "When we started the Rodriguez Financial Literacy Initiative," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly to the back of the auditorium, "we thought we were simply providing education about banking and credit. What we discovered was that financial literacy is actually about dignity, agency, and the power to make choices about your family's future." Over the past 18 months, we've served over 1,500 families, and what we've learned has transformed not just their lives, but our understanding of what community-centered programming can accomplish. The program had grown far beyond Maya's initial vision. What began as basic financial education had evolved into a comprehensive empowerment initiative that included small business development loans, home ownership counseling, and advocacy for inclusive banking policies. The Rodriguez Financial Literacy Initiative now operated in 4 cities across Oregon and Washington, with requests for replication coming from organizations nationwide. Maya clicked to the next slide, showing photographs of program participants who had achieved milestones that would have seemed impossible when they first enrolled. Carmen Morales, who had participated in Maya's early focus groups, now owned a successful catering business that employed 6 other immigrant women. The Gutierrez family had purchased their first home using credit they had built through program participation. Maria Santos had completed business training and opened a childcare center that served families in her neighborhood. "The most important lesson we've learned," Maya continued, "is that effective programs don't just serve communities. They're owned and controlled by communities. When people have decision-making power over the resources that affect their lives, programs become more innovative, more responsive, and more sustainable than anything designed by outside experts, no matter how well-intentioned." The applause was sustained and enthusiastic, but Maya was thinking about the people who weren't in the auditorium, the families she had met that morning at a community center in southeast Portland, the program participants who had trusted her with their stories and dreams, and the staff members who had worked overtime to ensure that services remained excellent even as demand grew rapidly. After her presentation, Maya was surrounded by conference attendees who wanted to learn more about community ownership models and culturally responsive program design. A foundation program officer from Chicago asked about replication strategies. A policy researcher from Washington, D.C., inquired about evaluation methodologies. A community organizer from Phoenix wanted guidance on building similar initiatives. With Latino families in her city, Maya answered questions thoughtfully, but she was also aware that national recognition brought both opportunities and risks. Scaling successful programs required maintaining the community relationships and cultural responsiveness that made them effective in the first place, which could be challenging when growth pressures pushed organizations toward standardization. And efficiency over customization and community control. The key, Maya told the Chicago Foundation officer, is ensuring that replication includes genuine community ownership rather than just program duplication. Communities need to have decision-making, authority over how services are designed and delivered, not just input into programs that have already been created elsewhere. During the conference lunch break, Maya stepped outside to call her grandmother Elena, a tradition she had maintained throughout her travels for speaking engagements and organizational meetings. Elena had become Maya's touchstone for staying, grounded in values and relationships that mattered more than professional recognition or organizational growth. "How did the speech go, Mija?" Elena asked, and Maya could hear the pride in her grandmother's voice, despite her attempts to sound casual about Maya's achievements. "It went well, Abuela," Maya said. "People are interested in learning from what we've built here in Portland, but I keep thinking about what you taught me about success, that it only matters if it serves people you love and communities you belong to." "Your brother would be so proud," Elena said quietly. "Not just because you're successful, but because you're using that success to help families like ours. That's what he always dreamed you would do." Maya felt the familiar mixture of grief and gratitude that accompanied thoughts of Luis. His photograph still sat on her desk at Veteran Solutions, Inc., now accompanied by letters from program participants and awards recognizing the organization's innovations in community-centered service delivery. But Maya knew that Luis would have been most proud of the daily work rather than the public recognition, the individual conversations with families, the policy advocacy that removed barriers to financial services, and the organizational culture that prioritized community empowerment over institutional growth. That evening, Maya returned to Portland and drove directly to the community center where the Rodriguez Financial Literacy Initiative held its evening classes. She had missed too many sessions while traveling for conferences and meetings, and Maya was determined to maintain direct contact with program participants rather than becoming an administrator who managed services from a distance. The current cohort included 12 families, ranging from recent immigrants who were learning basic banking concepts to established residents who were preparing to apply for small business loans. Maya arrived during the session on credit building and sat in the back of the room, listening as program coordinator Sofia Herrera led participants through strategies for establishing positive credit histories while managing family financial obligations. Maya watched Carlos and Ana Ruiz, who had enrolled in the program 6 months earlier when Carlos lost his construction job due to an injury. Through program participation, they had learned about disability benefits, developed a budget that allowed them to maintain their apartment while Carlos recovered, and begun planning for Ana to start a home-based alterations business using skills she had learned in El Salvador but had never monetized in the United States. The hardest part wasn't learning about credit scores or business licenses, Ana told the group during discussion time. The hardest part was believing that people like us could own businesses and build wealth in this country. The program didn't just teach us financial skills. It helped us see ourselves differently. Maya felt tears prickle her eyes as she listened to Anna's reflection. This was exactly what Luis had envisioned when he talked about community empowerment, not just helping people navigate existing systems, but helping them recognize their own power to create economic opportunities and build generational wealth. After the session ended, Maya stayed to help clean up and chat informally with participants. These conversations had become essential to her leadership, providing insights into program effectiveness that couldn't be captured through surveys or formal evaluations. Tonight, several participants mentioned that their adult children were interested in entrepreneurship training, suggesting the need for programming that served multiple generations within immigrant families. "Maya," said Roberto Flores, whose family had completed the program the previous year, "my daughter Sophia just graduated from high school, and she wants to start a business doing social media marketing for small companies. Do you think the program could help young people who have business ideas but need guidance about the financial side?" Maya realized that Roberto was identifying exactly the kind of program evolution that could serve emerging community needs while building on existing strengths. "Roberto, that's a brilliant idea," she said. "Would you be interested in helping us design programming for young entrepreneurs? We could use your experience as a program graduate to make sure the services actually meet families' needs." This conversation sparked Maya's thinking about the next phase of organizational growth. Rather than simply expanding existing programs to new locations, Veteran Solutions Inc. could develop new services based on insights from community members who understood evolving needs from personal experience. The most innovative programming would come from participants who had benefited from existing services and could identify gaps or opportunities for additional support. Over the following weeks, Maya worked with David and the staff team to develop a strategic plan that prioritized community-driven innovation over external expansion. They would establish a community advisory council composed of program graduates who would have decision-making authority over new program development. They would create a small grants program that allowed community members to pilot innovative approaches to economic empowerment. Most importantly, they would maintain the organization's commitment to community ownership even as it grew in size and visibility. The strategic planning process reinforced Maya's understanding that successful leadership meant creating systems that could function effectively without depending on any single individual's vision or capabilities. Luis's legacy needed to be embedded in organizational structures and community relationships rather than just in Maya's personal commitment to serving immigrant families. 6 months later, Veteran Solutions Inc. celebrated its 5th anniversary with a community festival that drew over 2,000 attendees. Former program participants staffed information booths about their businesses. Community partners led workshops on topics ranging from home ownership to immigration law. Local musicians and artists provided entertainment that reflected the cultural diversity of the families the organization served. Maya moved through the crowd, greeting families she had known since the early days of program development and meeting. New community members who were just beginning to explore services. She was struck by how the organization had become truly community-owned in ways that went beyond legal ownership structures. People talked about our programs and our organization with the kind of pride and investment that indicated genuine belonging rather than just service utilization. During the festival's closing ceremony, Maya stood before the assembled crowd. With David beside her, they were announcing the establishment of the Luis Rodriguez Community Leadership Fund, which would provide scholarships for program participants to pursue higher education or professional development opportunities that would prepare them for leadership roles in community organizations. Luis Rodriguez believed that people from our communities needed to control the resources and organizations that served our families. Maya said, her voice carrying across the park where the festival was held. Today, we're creating opportunities for the next generation of community leaders who will build on what we've started here and take it further than any of us can imagine. As Maya spoke, she saw faces in the crowd that represented the full scope of transformation that had occurred over the past 3 years. Elena sat in the front row, surrounded by other elder community members whose wisdom had guided program development. Rosa Delgado stood with staff members from partner organizations who had helped create the collaborative network that made comprehensive services possible. Program participants held their children, some of whom were now old enough to understand that their families' improved circumstances had resulted from community organizing and mutual support. Maya realized that Luis's promise had been fulfilled in ways that exceeded even David's most optimistic projections. The shy college student who had returned a lost wallet had become a leader whose work was creating opportunities for hundreds of families while honoring the sacrifice of a soldier who had never stopped believing in his sister's potential. But Maya also understood that this celebration marked a beginning rather than an ending. The Rodriguez Financial Literacy Initiative was now sustainable and community-controlled, ready to continue growing and evolving under the leadership of people who understood its mission from lived experience. Maya's role was shifting from program creator to movement builder, working to ensure that community ownership models could be replicated and adapted in other cities while maintaining their commitment to authentic empowerment rather than just service delivery. As the festival ended and families began gathering their belongings, Maya felt the deep satisfaction that comes from work that serves purposes larger than personal achievement. Luis's sacrifice had created a legacy that would continue long after Maya's own involvement, touching lives in ways that honored both his memory and the dreams they had shared for their community's future. The story that began with a returned wallet had become something far greater than either Maya or David could have imagined, a testament to the power of authentic kindness, community ownership, and the courage to believe that ordinary people can create extraordinary change when they're given the resources and authority to serve communities they belong to and love. 10 years later, Maya received a call that brought everything full circle. A young veteran named Carlos Martinez had found her business card in his grandfather's wallet, a grandfather who had passed away after completing the Rodriguez Financial Literacy Initiative and building a successful landscaping business that now employed 12 people. "Ms. Rodriguez," Carlos said, "my grandfather always told me that if I ever needed help transitioning from the military, I should call the woman who changed our family's life. I just got back from deployment, and I want to start a non-profit for veteran families, but I don't know where to begin." Maya smiled, remembering her own uncertainty years earlier. "Carlos, let's have coffee. I'd love to hear your ideas and share what I've learned about building something meaningful." As she hung up the phone, Maya looked at the photograph of Luis on her desk, now surrounded by images of hundreds of families who had built businesses, purchased homes, and created generational wealth through community-owned programs. The Rodriguez Financial Literacy Initiative had expanded to 37 cities, each location controlled by the communities it served. Maya realized that Luis's true legacy wasn't just her success, it was the endless cycle of empowerment that occurred when people used their own transformation to lift others. Carlos would receive the same kind of support that David had given her, and someday he would pass that gift forward to someone else who needed to believe in their own potential. The shy girl who returned a wallet had learned that the most powerful changes happen when kindness creates opportunity, and opportunity creates more kindness. What small act of courage could you take today that might change someone's life forever? Sometimes the most extraordinary transformations begin with ordinary decency. If this story inspired you to believe in the power of authentic kindness and community empowerment, please subscribe to our channel for more stories about how every day heroes create lasting change. Your support helps us share these important messages with people who need to hear them. What will your story be?